Next up, we're going to hear from R.D. Whitney, the co-founder and director of the Virtual Events Institute. For over 30 years, R.D. Whitney has focused on creating communities that bring buyers and sellers together through the gravity of professional training, events, online learning, education, peer learning, and data.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for that. I'm really happy to present today on building engaged 365 communities. We've got a really diverse audience from all around the world here, and this is such a global topic. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about just get the background out of the way here, but to give 4 specific examples of community that I've been involved in building to hope spark some ideas for you as you think about building engaged communities, either from event assets, publishing assets, or perhaps you've been building communities, part of a community all along through an association or some type of organization. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how a marketing is evolving towards this model, and then hit on a couple sort of summary points. My background for 30 years, I've been building communities. It started in specialized publishing, taking media assets and developing communities in professional niche areas. So I'm going to talk through some of those examples, and hopefully I can bring you some ideas on how to build, use the community model in your corporation, association, nonprofit, or organization. And when I talk about community, I think about it as pillars. I think about it as these specific points of education or buyer-seller connection that you can put in a community. And I think it's helpful to literally think of them as pillars. Think of them as pillars that are holding up the roof of your community. So that could be conferences, trade shows, online training, virtual events, industry award programs, SaaS businesses, research, database, validation, publishing, peer learning, online marketplaces, certification programs, or sponsored membership businesses. And I like this analogy here. When you think about bringing some of these together and what can potentially happen, many years ago, I got the chance to take my daughters to Yellowstone and see Old Faithful. And there were 3 things happening at the same time here. That's what consistently makes this geyser go off. Within the caldera, there is water, plumbing, and heat all happening at the same time. So that gives the opportunity to cause this consistent reaction that happens very faithfully, and comes the name Old Faithful. Well, in the membership model, I have a premise that if you bring these pillars together in that type of way, they can work off of each other and create a very consistent reaction of your members and give you and help you accomplish the goals you're trying to accomplish in your community. So let me just talk through a couple examples. I think that's the best way to kind of think about this. And there's all types of communities out there. The word gets thrown around a lot and has different meanings to everyone. But I'm talking specifically about niche professional communities here, where maybe a profession didn't have a home, and this gives the professionals a place to come together to learn from each other, peer learning, and to advance their career, keep their company in compliance, help their company grow. Those are the types of communities I've been involved in, but there's certainly lots of others, and we can talk through some of those as well. But my example here is IOFM, the Institute of Finance and Management. And here we took just really a print publishing newsletter, a subscription-based newsletter, and we created an online membership community that we loaded it with tools and resources and tips and white papers and things that would help that profession be more successful in their job, advance their career, stay in compliance. And we also developed a certification program, which became very meaningful to that profession. And these were for the professions of accounts payable and accounts receivable. And then we also started doing live events in Disney and Vegas, and lots of virtual events, of course. And that became a thriving community, all the way from that print newsletter that was going out of business to 24 months. It became a thriving community where the certification meant something. It was acquired by a large event company, and I got to go with it, and I got to create this new group called the BCom Group inside of this large family-owned publishing and event company. And the premise was that I could take an event and create a community from it and add these other very lucrative pillars to it. So if you are in the community space as a media company or as an event company, and you're doing it to create a profit from the connection of buyers and sellers, these models work very, very well. There's other motives in product-driven communities and passion communities, of course, but I'm talking specifically about here for these examples. So we started doing that in other areas. We tried it in this area where there was a conference for administrative professionals, and we had a free online association with tools and resources and articles and webinars, online virtual events, if you will. And also we started developing an online training program for this audience. So we launched this, and all of the components, just like in Old Faithful, worked really well together. And that the entire portfolio grew tremendously because of these things coming together. The point is, it's just not 3 days coming to an event and then see you next year. It's a community working together. And to kind of push this idea further, I want to show an example. I recently did this in the healthcare space. Now, here was an example where you have thousands and thousands and thousands of vendors trying to push their products to the purchasing person who buys, in this case, health benefits for a corporation in America with self-insured employers. A $3.7 trillion spend in America, kind of messed up, as a lot of people know, a lot of room for improvement. So what we were doing here on the buy side is creating a community of validated vendors. So the vendors were making marketing claims. So why couldn't we get a data scientist, understand what the intervention was behind that marketing claim, and then validate that vendor for the benefit of the buyer, which was great and very well received. But what we really realized was that the buy side could be helped by bringing peers together and creating consistent online learning around the topics of buying. And so we created the Certified Health Value Professional, all online, all part of this growing community that we call the Validation Institute. So the components, like as we showed earlier, those pillars coming together, they can be brought in depending on the characteristics of the group, and they could benefit the group, and they can be very profitable as well, sustainable, let me call it, for the community. So another thing the community can think about is the ecosystems around it. So it's a lot of times the buyer is confused by all the platforms and technologies and software programs and everything that come into play, and they don't know even where to start. So somebody that's running a community can get started by simply trying to create a standardization or an organization of that chaos. And maybe this takes the form of an online directory, but even start with a graphic, right? To just take your areas, and here's one on the left in the accounting technology space, and on the right in the medical technology space, 2 ecosystems I created. And put the logos of the companies that are in those categories that you've just created. This is a huge benefit to the person purchasing within that community, and it can help to form a community. So I got one more example for you, and this launched, it's been, just about a year ago now, actually. The COVID hit, as we all know, and I had been involved in virtual events since the very first virtual events back in 2010. Here's a press release I did in 2010. And the findings of this press release are what we see today. They don't replace live shows. They never will. Live shows are very, very important for human interaction in the buyer-seller relationship. What they do is they extend the physical show. They extend the community, if you will, to a year-round 365 community. We were just a little early on this, but what did happen is I got put on a webinar a year ago, last April, around the monetization of virtual events because of my experience in that. And 15,000 people from around the world came on that webinar. And so me and 3 other co-founders got together, 2 in London and 1 in Washington, D.C. We realized it was an immediate need for people to understand best practices for running virtual events. There was no community for virtual events professionals, this whole new profession that was being sort of thrust upon us, and a real opportunity for a lot of people to learn these skills. So we got together and launched a certification program that brought together the best practices of virtual events. We also, and then that just grew very nicely. So it now trains Informa Markets, Hyatt Hotels, corporations and organizations all around the world. and it's continuing, has education coming out, and it's formed a community. The second thing they did, and again, thinking about those pillars coming together in the formation of a community, the second thing they did was create an awards program. The CEO had come out of Cannes Lions, which is an amazing example of everybody sharing their best practices back, so you can create a community where people can see everyone's best practices. It really is that easy. And everybody is clamoring for that. Like, what is the benchmark for a good virtual events in the sports area, or in the business area, or in the association space? What are good techniques for audience engagements? So all these things had to be kind of brought together, and they were all out there. They just needed to be brought together by subject matter experts and peers working together to help each other through that thing. But VEI has become just a thriving community. So when we talk about community, we talk about there's all kinds of communities, and the ones I've been talking about are professional communities, professional niche communities that don't have a home, that can benefit from having a community. I call them institutes. And I like this phrase, the riches are in the niches, that there's a lot of opportunity to be created by creating communities, by drilling down to the specialty area. So that's something just to think about. But there are so many communities out there now. It is growing. And I will argue, I think community kept the worldwide global commerce going through the pandemic. This is what kept us together from a business standpoint, and also from an emotional standpoint. It kept us connected. And thanks to great technologies like the one we're on today that are developing at an incredibly rapid pace. And it's so exciting. So what's possible today was not possible 18 months because this was not thrust upon us. We were not forced to be on meetings and calls like this, and it has become part of our day-to-day workflow. When I'm talking to reporters now about virtual events, I recall once that about 10 years ago, I flew to Las Vegas for a lunch meeting from Boston. First of all, horrible from every standpoint. Carbon footprint, terrible. I didn't get home for dinner, of course, because I flew there in the morning and flew back, and it's just for a lunch meeting. I have 15 of those meetings a day now, just having online interactions, and the power of virtual events allows us to attend events that we never could have before. And the idea that we could attend an event in a time and a place is so random and so consequential. Like, I mean, the chances you have something in life happening at that time are great. So why wouldn't you want to be able to participate in some way that you can? Yes, the participation is going to be different, but the overall community benefit is great. And what event producers are finding and associations are finding is that the virtual audience is a tenfold increase, and that the live event is going to be that much tighter when they come together, because we all do crave that face-to-face when we can go. So great, communities exploding. Community is a huge opportunity for corporations, nonprofits, associations, and organizations all around the world. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Peloton and Instapot as great examples of community. There's many of them. But at the same time, in February, TechCrunch came out with an article that said the chief community officer is the new CMO. The chief community officer is the new CMO. So, and they had this definition here in quotes, and I just put in bold here. My thoughts is a community is a home. It's a place of belonging, as we've talked, but it's the future of marketing as well. Why? Harvard Business Review also reinforced this about how corporations are going directly to the consumer through the community model. So community is the new form of marketing. I just sketched this. This is not to scale. This is just to make the point that, those are fans of Mad Men and Don Draper will remember sort of the Madison Avenue days of advertising, moving to direct marketing, moving to one-to-one marketing, but that's still one way. And then when the internet came along and social media started really taking hold and marketers got their hands on it, social media started making it two-way and chaos. and the messages were everywhere and loud, and it's very hard to kind of know what's going on. Inbound marketing came around and said, it's really about the quality of the content and bringing peers together around niche areas, making it much more meaningful, but still chaotic. And now community is getting a hold of it, saying, you can own your audience. You can bring your audience together and constantly nurture your audience in a way that is valuable to your audience. So we took that and we said, what if we could bring community leaders together? Wouldn't that be interesting? And anybody that's a fan of Seinfeld, you'll remember Kramer had a concept for a coffee table book of coffee tables. So we wanted to create a community of communities and just do a test and see, would people come together around this idea that if community is growing as such a global thing and also becoming the future of marketing, what if we loaded it with tools and resources and created a community for community leaders? And that's what we're launching. So we did a test community, and within the next 10 days, we're launching a community for community leaders called the Community Leaders Institute. And it's an exciting gathering of professionals in that area. But I wanted to do this presentation to just challenge you, to get you thinking about different types of communities, and to get to thinking them as the products of sustainabilities within the communities. And I'm going to give a couple quick examples here. I was at lunch 10, 12 years ago with someone, sat next to the table, and he had bought a print directory of oil rigs in the Gulf. So it had the details of what were in the rigs. He put that into a website and created a subscription product. You can bet any of those suppliers then subscribe to it. And the last I had heard, I had lost track of where this was, but it was over a $10 million product, subscription-based SaaS product, by the way, what all the investors want to invest in. Another example, my partner at 365 Media noticed these storage units going up all around the highways and all throughout America because we have too much stuff, so we rent closets and garages to put our stuff in. But what do you charge for those? Well, the price was sitting right on the individual mom and pop storage unit company on their website, but it was never brought together and collected. So he brought them together and collected it and then created a subscription product called StoreTrack. And now that's a very significant product in that industry, and it's a community, if you will. So a community can take a lot of forms. It can be profitable and sustainable. And I hope I've put forth a few ideas here to help you think about different types of community when you're thinking about your community as well. So I know we're getting short on time here, but wanted to lay out some of those ideas of community and hopefully get you thinking of community. And again, whether you're a company thinking of your product and creating a community for your product, that's a great way to go, as Instapot and Peloton will show you, and thousands and thousands of other examples. Associations who have been doing this model for years, but now there's so much more possibilities of this because of the possibility of interacting with digital engagement, thanks to great tools like this, and as well as nonprofits and media companies and event companies saying it's not just about those 2 or 3 days we get together, it's going to be about a community all year long. So there's some ideas there for community development, and I glad to take any questions. My contact information is rd@365media.com. That's rd@365media.com. And I'd be glad to, I love to talk about community. I'd love to invite you into our community of community leaders. Of course, it's free, but just shoot me an email at rd@365media.com. And thank you, everybody, for your time today.